in early 1970. I was living in Washington, D.C., and distributing Back to Godheads on a college campus. It may have been Kent State, that's in Ohio, isn't it? It was around that time when Kent State happened, and there was so much unrest on the campuses and National Guard shooting at students, a very, very tense atmosphere. And we were there trying to distribute Back to Godheads and give out incense. That was pretty much the extent of our book distribution, Back to Godheads. Back then you'd get a quarter, sell a few, and that was a big deal back then, And all the students were so agitated, no one would take a magazine, and I remember I was being really upset, I was getting really upset, and then a newspaper reporter came up to me and asked if he could interview me, and I said, oh, sure, and I sat and talked to him about Krishna consciousness, and I made this comment. He wanted to know what I was doing before I joined this organization, and I told him a little bit about, living on the hippie farm, and I said I became discouraged with that philosophy. I said we were being misled by false rascals like Timothy Leary, I said to this reporter. Because actually I had studied some of Timothy Leary's books, and I felt betrayed because I realized they were simply saying take drugs and have great sex. And I wanted knowledge of the absolute truth, and I knew that was, material. It had to do with the physical body. What does that have to do with spiritual knowledge, And I became very disillusioned when I actually read one of his books and realized that was the conclusion. Take LSD and have great sex. So I said that to this reporter. We were being misled by false rascals like Timothy, promising God in a pill. Just swallow this pill and see God. And so they happened to in those days. A lot of the articles that came out in newspapers, devotees were very badly misquoted. They didn't understand what we were talking about, so they just, I think, go research a book in the library on Hinduism and write that. Some nonsense. But this happened to be one of the first articles where they actually quoted quite accurately, so they wrote my exact words in the paper. And I think maybe that's why this article had some particular potency, because they actually got it right, what we said. It was a very long article. A lot of other devotees said a lot of nice things too, So when they showed, but this part happened to be right at the front of the article, the thing I said. And actually when they published the article in the Washington Post, a photographer came to the temple and took a picture of me for the article. And when it came out, it was on the front page of the style section of the Washington Post, this prestigious. The whole front page was this big picture of my face. I'm extremely camerish. I was so embarrassed, but by Krishna's mercy, I'm not photogenic usually, but by some quirk of Krishna's mercy, this was a really nice photograph. I actually looked nice in this photograph, which is, if I'd looked like normally, like a gargoyle, like I usually do, and it would have been horrible, and I had this big nose ring with a chain coming to my ear, and they published that, and with this article. And when they showed the article to Prabhupada, and he read my comments about Timothy Leary, I'd said specifically false rascal. And of course I got that terminology from hearing Prabhupada, He made a statement to the devotees that showed him the article. He said, George Harrison has given me $19,000 for printing the Krishna book, but this girl has given me $19,000 million by her statement. So, I was a very young devotee when I heard that. I can't tell you how much encouraging it was. Perhaps Prabhupada said it to encourage me, but he was so merciful. I just basically, I wasn't exactly parroting something I'd heard from him, because I did have that realization, but it was definitely Prabhupada's inspiration that made me say that. So I think that's a lot of the way Prabhupada interacted. He would inspire us, and then if we were surrendered to the inspiration, it would be this like reciprocal exchange between the guru and disciple that was extremely esoteric and difficult to explain, but I think most of us have, understand. It's an experience that one has.
After a certain time, this was after I was initiated, then I blooped. I was the second bloop in the movement, right? My distinction, I was one of the first people to cause Prabhupada great pain and suffering, right? But the devotees would have to come and get me because Prabhupada's electronic equipment was always breaking down, and I was the only one who knew how to fix it. So they would have to come and get me. So I remember one time they got me, something was broken. And I was talking to Kirtanananda, and I think this was when I had my first Golubjaman. I don't remember if this was the first time I saw Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra. Anyway, Kirtanananda and I were talking, and Prabhupada came into the room, and he walked right up to me, and he said, even if you don't want to be one of us, you must associate with us. You cannot get away from us. So Prabhupada was always very concerned. I'll tell you a story how concerned Prabhupada was. There was a boy who turned up that I didn't know. He started coming again, but some of the boys who'd been with Prabhupada earlier knew him. He seemed like just an ordinary guy, you know, somebody from the Lower East Side. But Prabhupada seemed to know him. And I saw Prabhupada talking with one of the other guys, and Prabhupada said, oh, he's making advancement, don't you think? Now, Prabhupada was very eager that he should make advancement. And I found out later that this was a young man who had attacked Prabhupada with a knife. You know, and Prabhupada had to go next door to Mukunda's apartment for shelter. But Prabhupada's only thought was, don't you think he's making advancement? That's all he cared about.
Once in a morning walk, Prabhupada was, this was in America, Prabhupada was discussing the Apichet Sudarachato Bhajate Mamananya Bhak, that verse. That if one is rightly situated in devotional service, even if he falls down and commits even a heinous fall down, he's still considered saintly if he's rightly situated and carries on his devotional service. So Prabhupada was speaking about that. And then one devotee raised the point, Srila Prabhupada, you're saying that if it's an accidental fall down, then Krishna considers him saintly. But if it's premeditated, then that's a different situation. Then we're sinning in knowledge. So how do we know if the fall down is accidental? So Prabhupada, he was walking and he stopped for about 30 seconds, and then he said, if he comes back, it was accidental. That was his answer. And how I understood it was that if someone bloops and is gone and comes back 10, 15, 20 years later, if he comes back and takes up devotional service again, then Prabhupada will consider it was an accidental fall down. And to me, that just showed the ocean of compassion that Srila Prabhupada was. He had so much mercy, so much compassion, that someone would fall down, fall away completely, but if he would come back, Prabhupada would consider that all those years in Maya was simply an accidental fall down. Such a compassion. So I mean, that really hit home.
At that time, Timothy Leary was very big among the hippies, and he was a big LSD king, and he had a place up in Millbrook, New York. And a few of us were sitting around this prasadam room talking one day, and some young man came in that I didn't know, but some of the other devotees knew him, and he was giving us all the latest hippie gossip, so of course I was very interested, you know. And then he said, well, so-and-so just came back from Millbrook, and they had the wildest party up there. So immediately I was all ears. I want to hear about this wild party. And Prabhupada looked through the window and said, Umapati, you are not sitting properly. Because I had my back to the altar. So I had to turn around and face the altar, and I couldn't hear anything that was said. The whole thing was blocked.
Another evening I was reading to Srila Prabhupada the pastime of Pralambasura with Lord Balaram. And Srila Prabhupada was really enjoying that. And then we got to the point where Pralambasura was being pummeled by Lord Balaram. And Srila Prabhupada, began laughing, and he exclaimed very boldly, he said, "This is God." And then he told how when he was a child, he used to enact this pastime with his sister. And he said, and I would play Balaram. And then he laughed and laughed about that. So that was very sweet.
Hayagriva and I were looking at the dust cover of the Srimad Bhagavatam that Prabhupada had brought from India, the material and spiritual world. And there's the big lotus, and then there's all these bubbles. So we were looking at that, and there was one bubble we both liked. We said, wow, this is nice. Yeah, far out, man. Yeah, that's where I want to go. Yeah, boy, that really looks great, So we said, yeah, we decided this is where we wanted to go. So he was on his way to the temple. I had something else to do. So I said, ask the Swami what that bubble is. Then that afternoon I came back, I said, did you ask the Swami what that bubble is? He said, yeah. He said, it's the material world.